So maybe welcome everyone. Here we are with the webinar on the Professional Development Program for Gender Trainers, and I'm going to hand over to Clemencia Muñoz Mayo, the head of the UN Women Training Center, to welcome you all.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants. As Ruya said, I am Clemencia Muñoz, and I am the head of UN Women's Training Center. I'm delighted to welcome you all to this informative webinar on the Professional Development Program for Gender Trainers, a program jointly conceived and developed by the UN Women Training Center and the Kid Royal Tropical Institute in the Netherlands. We will explain to potential participants, what the course involves, how much you will gain as a gender trainer by being part of it. On the screen, you will see now a brief outline of today's webinar. We first start briefly with an overview of the Professional Development Program, the purpose, and then we will present the history, rationale, and we will move then on to sharing some experiences of participants to finally have a session of questions and answers. So please remember to pose your questions at any time during the webinar using the questions feature, and we will pose them to the panelists during the Q&A sessions. In addition to myself, the panelists, next slide, Ruya. We have here with us today Julie Newton, who is the Senior Gender Advisor at Kid Royal Tropical Institute and the Program Manager from the PDPGT, which is the acronym for the program. We also have Motraye Mukhopadhyay and Franz Wong, who were involved in the conception of the program and facilitated 3 cohorts and will facilitate the next one as well. We also have 2 of our alumni, and we hope there are many more in the room that you can share and that we'll share during the questions and answers. We have Julia Bo-Karoum, who is an alumni of cohort 1, and she's a gender research and gender trainer. She led several projects in Lebanon and the MENA region, and currently she's acting as Gender Equality and Social Inclusion Advisor for the LEB-CAB implemented by USAID. Prior to this role, she was a member of the expert committee of the MENA Gender Barometer Round 1 under IVOS International, where she led on Lebanon Gender Barometer. Our other participant is Sarah Zon. She was cohort 3, and she's currently the senior advisor with Oxfam America's private sector department. Her work focuses on influencing company policies and practices, specifically looking at gender equality. Next. Welcome all the panelists. So a little bit on the purpose of the program. I think the overall purpose of this program is and will continue to be to reposition training for gender equality as a strategy to challenge and engender mainstreaming development and support the achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The specific objectives are, we have summarized the specific objectives as the 3 following main ones. First would be to rethink training for gender equality as a feminist knowledge transfer and knowledge creation. So secondly, to reclaim training as a catalyst for feminist knowledge and gender transformation. And finally, develop a cadre of gender trainers equipped with feminist pedagogical principles. The learning aims of the program, we expect that you will be equipped at the end of the program with the following learning aims. So first, you would have sharpened your training skills and knowledge of gender and development concepts as a gender equality trainer. You would be able to better employ learning and knowledge strategies, and you would be able also to reclaim training for gender equality as a political feminist process, and you will have renewed energy as a gender equality trainer and commitment to gender training as a transformational process. We will move now on to Julie, who will share, she will go over the history of the program. Julie, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Clemencia. Before we dive in, it is really important to look at the history of the program, of where the seed was sown. And we wanted to tell you a little bit about that to give you a flavor. And it started around 2016, where, if you just go back one slide, 2016, when there was a technical meeting in the UN Women looking at the history of gender training. And one of the key recommendations that came out of that was the need to look at the way gender trainers have been trained as professionals and the impact of that work. And that was sort of the planting of the partnership between our two organizations, where it led to a further deep dive into what was the status of gender training out there so far and how, what impact that had. And this led to the design of the course, bringing in Moitri in France from our work at KIT and our long history of gender training. And together, this was a perfect partnership to go into gender training as a transformative process. And that paper uncovered a lot of important points which Moitri is going to talk about and how that led to the focus of the course. Over to you, Moitri.
Thanks. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, good. Well, in 2016, we did, as Julie has already said, we did a survey. It was a desk study. And we combined our own experiences of having done women in development training and gender training for about 15 years at KIT. We were a hub of training in Europe and international training programs. So we had a lot of experience and we used that to do this desk study. What we found from accounts of gender training and the way gender had been mainstreamed or not was that there was erosion of the feminist ideals of transformation, because gender in development began as a critique to mainstream development. And that gender trainers, although on the average well-educated, and some had qualifications on gender and development, were mostly learning about gender and about training from their jobs, from their employers, and basically on the job. This meant that their knowledge fitted the organization's goal, rather than provide the trainer, expert, the authority of an independent knowledge base from which to hold programs and programs to account. Next slide, please. So following on from these findings, look at this very nice PowerPoint. We followed, but it has a logical flow from what we found in the survey. So we made the professional development program for gender trainers, not just as any other training program that was available, gender training program that was available. We based it in 2017 on the following principles. One was, the first and very important one for us was to inculcate a conceptual fluency among participants. That is, to understand how general knowledge about social relations, intersectionality relates to development, so that actually practitioners, gender trainers, because they're called on to gender train in almost in various development situations, can always use that knowledge to bring an understanding of how the particular area that they're training in is gendered. We also wanted people to understand, and that was one of the principles, and appreciate the episteme or the theory of knowledge on which the gender development debate is based. And why? Because most trainers come to us from different backgrounds. They only learn gender training probably on the job. And the problem is that since they're from different disciplines, they do not come at social relations in the same way. The third was to try and acquaint participants with the historically embedded methodologies of gender training. That is, what we mean is that gender training, they were not the first people that were doing it or talking about it, but that has been a practice that has been enriched by 3 decades of practice, and in diverse settings, from India to Kenya to wherever. Overall, gender training has been practiced, and we have developed methodologies through this practice. And finally, it was also to enable participants to learn methods and not just tricks, not just skills, methods. And that the important part of the way we teach methods is to question and be critical about accepted ways of defining the importance of gender. For example, or gender as such. For example, in most accounts, gender, in development accounts, gender becomes a binary of men and women, loses the fluidity, leaves out anybody who doesn't conform to this binary, etc. So we wanted to use methods, or rather we wanted to use methods that actually question the way in which gender is understood in development. Okay, now I think back to Julie.
Yeah, thanks, Moitri, for that. Yeah, so with that history in mind, where are we now? We have gone through 3 cohorts of this training already, and this was possible through our partnership together, and also through the support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Rubani Foundation, and the Orange Lodge program. And where we are now is that we're entering a phase 2 of the program, and we're kickstarting this with the 4th round of the training as we co-create how we're going to take this forward. We have built up an alumni of over 80 participants across the world, which is amazing. And we recently had a very inspiring interaction all together to figure out how we can move this forward together. And in that spirit, I'm delighted to hand over the floor to 2 of our alumni, starting with Sarah, to share what they got out of the program. Over to you, Sarah.
Great, thank you so much. And you can move it to the next slide, I believe. Perfect. Thank you so much. And I just have to say, this is a fantastic community. And I've, even after finishing the program, I have continued to feel support and just like a fantastic group to come back to and just continue on this journey. So I just have to say thank you so much for having me here today and sharing my experiences. Really quick, and then I'll hand it over to Julia. I wanted to say that, you know, as Moitri was explaining, the one of the things that it really gave me this particular training is thinking about that theoretical expertise. So as Moitri was explaining, it's completely my story as well, being at Oxfam and learning how to do gender, or, you know, thinking about how this work applies to my day-to-day job. It was really, you know, just the doing and not really having the theory and not really testing out some of those assumptions. So this really gave me an opportunity to think about what are the biases that I have, how do I build the foundation in terms of theory and test that out and question it. So having that base was fundamental, and I continue to draw upon it. I mean, in particular, in the US where I'm based, thinking about racial justice, in particular, thinking about intersectionality. How can I talk about that from a place of confidence and awareness, where I'm still continuing to learn and grow, but actually have some of that theory to draw on, has been essential. This community of having peers to test and grow together has been fundamental as well, right? We are, as I see some of the participants from all over the world, that is the richness of this program, to really, and I think that also helps you to question and critique and learn about where you're coming from and what learning that you bring and how you're going to change that. I wanted to put this here as a third point because I think for me, it has really been a constant theme throughout this past year after graduating is seek out those uncomfortable conversations. Look for the discomfort, and in a good way. I think that this program really helped us to have those uncomfortable conversations that maybe when you're in your day-to-day job, it doesn't really, there's no time for it, or especially during COVID, it's sort of, when can you have those types of conversations? And actually being able to challenge myself and be able to do that, I think has been a theme throughout, and I continue to do it to this day. Step into your own confidence as a gender expert. This as well, being able to talk about, being able to come to conversations feeling like I have a body of knowledge. I shouldn't doubt what I know, and I also shouldn't doubt that I have more to learn, right? So I think it's that constant push and pull and feeling confident when you do talk about these issues that you do have a ton of knowledge to bring to the table, and that don't question yourself. So I think that also, with this training, it really helped me to speak from a place of confidence more so than I had before. Another thing is that also recognize burnout. We talked a lot about this in terms of the pressures that you face when you are the gender expert coming into a room, or let's call the gender expert to do all this other work, really recognizing that burnout does happen, and absolutely within this field of civil society and elsewhere. But being that gender expert, you are called on a lot. And so I think that calling on this community for support has been so helpful and healthy for me in terms of approaching the work with a new type of lens. I also have a commitment coming out of this. So when you go through the program, you're making commitments to yourself and to the community about how you are going to apply what you've learned. And one of my big commitments was to mentor others in this space, really to promote the new gender champions. You don't even have to be a gender expert in terms of how I'm mentoring, but really trying to embed these feminist principles and the methodologies that we've learned, really trying to use this as a platform to help mentor others. And then finally, I think thinking about how do we design those programs with that gender analysis that's intentional, that's feminist. Some of the things that we had been doing for so long were, as Moitri explained, very binary. We were thinking about, is it benefiting women and is it benefiting men, and then we're good. And so I think it's, again, having those uncomfortable conversations, testing out our assumptions. That last point has been really essential in terms of designing and implementing programs. We still have so much more to learn, but really kind of coming with some questions to say, are we being inclusive? And so I think that's also been really key for my work. And I will hand it over to Julia. Thanks so much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. Well, Sarah expressed a lot about our feelings being part of a global community who are growing together, and this is very important. From my side, I would say first that I feel proud of being or belonging to such a global community, having that common understanding, common goals in order to apply our learning and to learn while practicing what we learned so far. From my side, I would like to focus on what this program has gave me so far and how it changed myself or my personal development into being a more confident trainer in the gender field. So I would say that it helped all these methodologies, all these concepts, all these introductions, all this process of learning that we went through equipped me to be much more able to understand the gender and see the inequalities that hidden behind the lines, because we can talk about inequalities at any time. We can even promote how we should fight inequalities. But if you don't live it, practice it, understand it on your daily basis, you wouldn't be able to take it with you, to raise the voice, to fight against these inequalities. So talking about the case, when I was back, I was able to see these inequalities that has been tackled all over the program, how we analyze them, how we proceed them, how we digest them. And on another level, by gaining this knowledge, it made me more confident in my shoes as a trainer. When I'm talking about inequalities, I've been able to recognize the labor division at home from a different lens. Also, myself and my husband, we think that we have a fair division of labor at home. But when you go back after sorry, my daughter is next to me. What another challenge of having, okay. So the labor division at home would be seen differently, would be understood differently. You would be, wherever you are, you can easily recognize the policies and the procedures put in place, to what extent they are inclusive or not. You can translate the simple attitude in our society from a lens of discriminatory, specifically on the gender base. You can understand as well to what extent the intersectionality is an important concept to look at and go through and dive in. When I'm being more confident as a trainer, that means I'm building new capabilities, I'm building new knowledge, I'm building upon what I have learned. So it's accumulating with time. But that means that I'm able now to digest more how the current context of the gender in my own context, be it in the country where I'm based in, be it in the global community where I belong to. So you can see it, how it's translated and how it is seen, how it's practiced. So you can be able as well to take it with you in the package of the training so that you can give live examples on how these inequalities or how these topics are being raised within our society. We need to understand that everything we do in our society from an intersectional approach, everything is related. Everything has an input in something. So we need to understand this relation in between each others and think how we can treat them separately in order to have more equalities, to see more rights coming for the rights holder. From another aspect as well, bringing example from other contexts, this is what the platform actually provides. When you have this big networking of alumni, you are able to communicate in a different context. You are able to bring in example and study cases. So this will enrich your content, enrich your package as a trainer. Now I'm working as a researcher as well. So how these concepts and methodologies that we learned during the program had a very important impact on my capacity as a researcher, from being able to do the gender analysis from a framework, from an intersectional approach, from having the understanding of the power structure that we have in our community, understand the gender division of the labor in order to understand how to tackle the development at the longer term, and to approach it from a feminist lens. Talking about these in the specific, for example, I remember one of the exercises that we had done is to gender audit one of the conventions for a sex. Look at these conventions and look at from a gender lens to see to what extent these conventions that has been made long time ago are actually inclusive from a gender lens. So this exercise by itself, it was an open eye for me. I took it as a concept and the tool with me all time long with my own work. Back to, for example, let's say the inequalities on the gender level. One of the funny experience or one funny story that we had back, I was attending in the cohort 1, 2017. And back then we traveled, we were doing it on set in Netherlands. And my daughter was 3 years old and she got sick. And my husband has to take her to the emergency. Once he arrived there, the first question that they addressed to him was, where is her mother? We want to ask her about medical records. And he was saying like, okay, I'm her father and I know a lot of stuff and I'm following up about everything. So you can ask me. They insisted. Back then, my husband's experience was a little bit hurting for him. Why? Because he felt like he's doing all the efforts to protect his kid, and how the society treated him by ignoring these efforts. Why I'm telling this story is to say that gender is not only about women's rights, it's about all of us. It's about the whole that of the spectrum that we face in our daily life, in our society, all these inequalities that are pushing or at least freezing the development agenda toward more justice. So this is what we have to look at, more justice. The final gain that we have from this training or from this program in general is, like Sarah said, we are part of this global community, and this is that important. We are now a big network of people that we know each other, that we can easily communicate from all over the world. And touch base on that, we recently created a WhatsApp group. So we invited everyone from our cohort, and each one from the cohort one was inviting another members from their own network, and the network was growing up fast. It was amazing. Why we need this networking? We need this networking because we need to keep on mentoring, having support, feeling like Sarah said, that I don't want to feel at a certain point that I'm hesitant in my information, my knowledge. I can easily tap or call someone I know that I feel like they can support me in the knowledge and in my work, in my research, in my materials, etc., etc. And the most important part is, Maitri somehow tapped on it, is the use of time, how we use our time. That's why we had this idea in our mind, let's get connected, because each one of us is part of this puzzle. So let's put this puzzle together toward more equalities and more justice. Thank you so much. I hold the floor now to Julie.
Thank you. Wonderful, Sarah and Julie. Thank you so much for sharing, and ending also with that theme of connection, which has been so important in what has happened in the world lately. And on that note, I just want to put the ball back to Moitri to explain why this course is so important now. Over to you, Moitri.
Thank you very much, Julie. And congrats to Sarah and Julia. That was lovely hearing from you. Well, we began, our core principle, I think, for doing this course was, or devising this course, was to, as you've heard from Sarah and Julia, to make gender knowledge the basis of gender training. And so I think one only realizes that when one realizes how much one doesn't know and what's happening. But why is that still a principle? And why is it even more urgent now? It's because the world changed. In the last 2 years, and you're still experiencing this change, we are all experiencing this change. Why that the COVID pandemic has radically altered our lives for now, in the way we relate, what we do, whether we still have jobs, whether our parents are still alive, whether we have sick people in the household or family. So all of this has been affected now. And as far as we can see, it is also into the future. What has it done? In terms of what we as development workers need to take note of, first, that it's exacerbated all the pre-existing inequalities of race, class, caste, gender, and age. And these inequalities have shown up like never before. And not only in the divide between developed and developing countries, no, It has also shown up in the poorer parts, the less fortunate parts, the more vulnerable parts of very rich societies. It's caused the crisis, basically, of survival for the most vulnerable. Most of us, for us working in gender and development and in development per se, it's revealed the failure of institutions of development. I mean, the social development goals, et cetera, what were they all aspiring for? And all the goals in previous decades, where was development supposed to reach us to? It was supposed to reduce suffering and also to promote well-being and human security. And international and national institutions were responsible for nurturing an economic, social, and political environment which would make this possible. But with the COVID pandemic, which started as a health crisis, actually, a crisis of public health, we realized, and then became a pandemic, which we need not have, is because we did not have all of the promised social welfare measures in place. Most countries had lost their public health. You know, the public health was such a strong public good, and ceased to be in this atmosphere. Has been for the last 1.5 decades disinvested. There's been no investment. And we're not talking only about the poor countries. We are talking also about the rich countries, especially the rich countries. And all other social welfare measures. People were dying, the older people were dying, etc. And there was nobody to take care of anybody. So the whole crisis of care became extremely apparent. And with the crisis in social care, what happened? Of course, the people who provide social care informally, but and have to bear the burden of doing so, which is primarily in most societies female, was pressed into service, and women got even more overburdened. In addition, the development model that we've been pursuing for the last decades has set forth also a catastrophic environmental crisis. So in combination, we are now at the point where we are, gender used to be a form of knowledge that was critiquing mainstream development on the basis of that it was not inclusive enough, that it didn't redistribute, that it didn't do enough for social care. Our work now, those who work in gender training and gender knowledge, our work now has become even more important. And so that's why we think that gender knowledge as the basis of gender training and how to inculcate in our participants the appreciation of this knowledge and the analytical and conceptual sharpness has become the moment, and to rescue gender in development has become the most important task. So going ahead, Julie, tell us more about when this program is and how it's organized.
Yeah. Before I go into that, Franz, do you want to add anything to what Moitri said before I go through some practical things?
Oh,
Welcome,
hi,
Franz.
everybody. Hi, can you hear me okay? I'm sorry,
Yes.
in Northern Canada. Great. Hello, everybody. I just want to add on to Moitri. And I think, this is about a professional development program for gender trainers. And as PDT 2.0, I think we need to take of what we've been trying to do in the first phase and now really lay bare through gender training the exact inequities that Moitri's talking about. And the role of gender trainers is so important right now to really in some ways, prevent us going back to the old normal, which was to ignore these power structures, to ignore the industry that we're involved in that we call development. And that's the really role of gender trainers, is to catalyze and to ensure that in some ways we can learn these hard lessons that we've all been living and experiencing, some more than others, through this pandemic. And we really aspire PDP GT 2.0 to play this role, and for the participants to really be holding the organization's account, ourselves account, to not really make those mistakes that we've made in the past, that Moich just talked about. So we're excited to be starting 2.0, and over to you, Julie. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Franz. So a little bit of some of the overview and practical issues, because I can see from the chat some of you are asking about that. This program is for gender professionals who are doing gender training. So that's why, as part of the criteria, we have this 3 years of minimum gender training experience, but recognizing that in your work, you are wearing many different hats as gender experts. What does it look like? It is a 6-month program. It's starting next year on the 21st of February, ending in 26th of August. And it's hybrid. We very much were thrown into the deep end, as all of us were, with the pandemic. And we learned a lot from that. And for that reason, we've opted for a hybrid version, which will start off virtual and ending face-to-face. It's in 3 parts. And these are very much building iteratively on each other. It starts with a conceptual basis, and then it weaves in the theory and practice all together through the next 2 modules. And you can find more information on that on the website. And as we were saying, we have learned a lot through our 3 rounds, and we are constantly enriching that experience and also building on our sharing experiences with our alumni recently. And we're planning to build that in going forward in phase 2. Timelines, which are very important. Next slide, please. Yes, so we have, this program is under the Orange Knowledge Program, which is a Dutch funding for scholarship. If you are interested in this scholarship, you do need to submit your application before the 10th of October, so that's not much time left. And this is a competitive program, so we do encourage you to get your applications in as soon as possible. And then the final applications are the 21st of November, where we are aiming for a final acceptance around the 6th of December. Where can you get more information? Some of you have been asking, how do I apply? You go to the project website, and on that website, you will find links to applying. You'll be asked several questions, and also to upload your CV and a letter where we're asking more qualitative information about your background on gender training and your motivation. And there's an email address for more information where you can find out more. So that's a bit about the practical issues. Now I would like to go to the next slide and open the floor for discussion. Over to you, Ria.
Great, thanks, Julie. I've got a couple of questions here that I'm going to share my screen so you can see. Okay, so hopefully you can all see this. These are 2 questions, pretty practical questions that have been posed by Maria and Sana. And the last one is just a marker, so you can ignore that. So these are 2 questions. So over to the panel.
All right, Moitri, do you want to tackle the first?
Just a minute.
Franz, can you see it?
Franz?
What definition of feminism? I'm sure Moichi and I will have something to say on this. It's an interesting question, in a sense that we're really dealing with feminisms. And so we have a broad understanding of feminism, and we don't use a definition per se. And it's really about a grounded theoretical perspective of understanding inequity, gender inequity at the individual to a structural level. And so what does that mean? So really it's a political understanding, an understanding of power, and it's understanding of how the system perpetuates itself. And it's using that understanding through how we understand problems, analyze problems, and also how do you bring that to training, even the way you train. And Julie referred to feminist pedagogy being very important to part of our process. Just not only talking about feminism, but living feminism in our teachings. Moitri?
Yes, I just want to add or rather emphasize the fact that we talk here about feminisms, because there are different roots, and there are because feminism overall is, after all, being practiced all over the world, and people have different contexts. So we respect the fact that it's about many feminisms, the bottom of which is the structural discrimination against one gender. Okay, let's go on.
Yeah, and there's a question from Maria saying, what is the common thread?
Where's the common thread? Sorry, I didn't see that question.
Yes, it's in the chat box. I think she was just saying, but I think you answered it when you talked about, the structural aspects. What is the common thread that connects all diverse kinds of feminism?
Okay. Okay.
Great. And I think I answered the other question already. And we put a link to the project website in the chat. And yeah, for scholarships.
Julie, can I just emphasize something about the second question? Many people come to us who are gender experts per se, and don't consider themselves as trainers. But we know very well that in every single institution that you're a gender expert, you are supposed to be the jack of all trades. So one of them is training. Even if you don't do training, you have to commission training. So I would suggest that we have had, and in future we will also have, people in gender and development who may not directly see their job as gender trainers, but at least should have a background in gender and development.
Absolutely. Julie or Franz, do you have anything to add about who can apply? And also there's some question in the chat box, which is asking about the costs. And so if you want to go into that a little bit.
I can tackle that one. Yes, we know that it is expensive, and that's something that we're working on, and why we don't have an answer how to reduce it at this point yet, but that's if we have more institutional support that can help us reduce this fee. So we also encourage you to reach out and support us with that in a way that we can lower this cost. But for now, yeah, indeed, we are looking for scholarships for support.
Okay, there is, Maria has continued her question. Why do you use feminist principles and not a clear definition of feminism? Franz, would you like to talk to that, or Julia? Julie?
I had a response to that, but it'd be great to also hear maybe Maria could get on the conversation. I'd love to engage with her if she wants to unmute herself. Julie, did you want to say something? Or should I pipe in?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, so it's an interesting question. So a strict definition of feminism. I think what we've described as our understanding and use of feminism isn't a particular school of thought of feminism that would be associated with a specific definition, and that in itself already solidifies and in some ways stops the growth and understanding of what we're talking about. So we really stay away from and what you'll learn from this course is that this is not a typical knowledge transfer course. We're not here to teach you to memorize definitions or memorize concepts or apply tools. We're here to develop a conceptual fluency of your understanding of the world, how you experience the world, how we experience the world, and how we experience inequity. And inequity takes many shapes and many forms. So we can't just apply one particular way to understand it. So therefore, we talk about feminisms. But then you're saying it could mean everything. Well, we talked about how one important part of our understanding of feminism is an intersectional understanding. That gender bias and gender inequity isn't based on whether you are a man or woman. It's based on your gender, a fluid understanding, a non-binary understanding of gender, and how that experience intersects with other social markers of different race, class, ethnicity, age, very important, ability. So that's really strong. That's a very important part of our understanding and use of feminism. You want to add on from there, Moitri? What else is important
No,
to
I
our
think
understanding?
that's what we're trying to do. I think what we're trying to convey is not to have fixed definitions, but to understand the concept and to understand the practice. So, what is a practice of equality as opposed to a practice, as opposed to the inequalities that we see? So, with, that's where we would like to build the concepts around, so that you can appreciate it and understand it. We are a little bit allergic to definitions because they seem to box us into needlessly narrow spaces that don't allow for the fluidity of gender. But we do have principles, as you can see. We have derived principles from what we understand has been the ailments of gender training as it is practiced within institutions of development.
One other part maybe I could add, Moitri, another recurring theme to our understanding of feminism, the importance of self-reflexivity. And what do I mean by that? It's really us as trainers and us as people who have really ambition for social change, who are feminists. But we come from our own background, our own positions, and we come from a different way we've been professionalized or schooled, and we need to be part of our role as trainers is to be self-reflective, is to understand our own unconscious biases. So why do we need to understand gender in a certain way? Why do I understand it in a heteronormative way? What is it about my own position that makes me see the world in a way that's really antithetical to a global understanding or global justice? So part of our work is really sort of inspiring people to look at your own thinking and our own thinking as trainers and as conveners. And we do that collectively. And that's where the solidarity comes from.
Great. Franz, Maitri, Julie, I think there's a question in the questions panel, which I think speaks to this really. And it's basically saying that one of the problems that gender trainers face is that usually you only have 2 or 3 days for training, and that really limits what you can do and how much you can share, and also the fact that most gender trainings don't talk about feminisms or women's rights or anything. So I guess the message that you've given us today is really that this program does, and this program supports gender trainers to navigate those limitations of projects which don't allow enough time for training. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to highlight that's specifically, like we don't have to wear feminism as badges when we go into the way we deal with the training and the issues that we highlight are informed by our feminist knowledge and from based in conceptually in gender knowledge. So that's one part of it. The second is we have to navigate all the time these extraordinarily constraining formats that we are given, because gender is important in that everybody has to somehow undergo gender training, but not that important that it will take over the life of an institution. So therefore, we are often constrained in terms of the time we are given, in terms of the scope, etc. These are really nice practical problems that we deal with as in our training program when we talk about application and we practice it. So welcome, please come to the course.
Yeah.
Can I
And
just add on quickly from that, Moichi? Absolutely, it's practice. But I think what's important is how do we, where we can, be subversive, and how do we use the power that we do have as trainers, even if it's a 3-day warning, give me a 1 hour. It's sharing about that and supporting each other and finding ways to resist in some ways. Actually, no, that's not really gender training if you want me to do something tomorrow for 1 hour. Of course, that's not always difficult if that's not so easy if that's your job. But we talk about subversion and how do we really not just accept these structures of development that in many ways are not very friendly towards social change or equity. And that's again going back to this pandemic issue of how do we as trainers not reproduce those processes that will eventually just take us back to where we started before COVID. Sorry, Julia, I jumped in.
no, that's okay. I just wanted to ask if we have any other alumni in the room who also want to share experiences. And if you are, please indicate in the chat and we can hand it over to you before we wrap up.
Perfect.
So yeah.
Julie, there's one question, just I think you already talked about this, but there's one of the participants, Imran Heather, says that he was selected for the program last year, but he couldn't secure a scholarship, and he was wondering about the number of scholarships available this year.
Yeah, so from the kids side, we have no secured scholarships at this stage, but for the OKP one, it really depends on the availability. And the first step of application is you have to be accepted through the program. So that's the first important step, is apply first, and then we can see if you're eligible for the OKP. And for the OKP, there are 3 criteria. You have to be employed, not working for an international NGO or large commercial organization. And if you come from the list of the priority countries, and there are links to that on our website where you can find more information. So hopefully that answers that one. And I see, yeah, how big will the group be? Usually we aim for around 25 participants.
Somebody has opened the OKP site. It doesn't help. You have to first be accepted by us.
Yeah,
We forward your name.
exactly. Yeah.
I think the one question was, Julie, for those who were previously accepted, I think we have a policy on that. Is that not correct?
We have encouraged them to let us know, and then they get the conditional yes. So yeah,
Yeah, okay.
if you haven't
Okay,
done
so they
so
still
already.
Great. So Imran, I think
Yeah.
the answer would be to write to the email address, which you
Yes.
saw on the screen before. I'll just go back to it so you can see it again. And so that email address at the bottom, if you could write to the program and let them know your situation. And that
Yeah.
goes for everyone else as well if they want more information.
I think we've run out of time, but if anybody wants more information, you've all got the link to the website and our emails. So please do get in touch. We hope that this has given you a flavor of the program. I want to say a big thanks to Sarah and Julia for sharing their experiences, and also to Clemencia, Adrian, and Ruya, and of course Moitri in France. Yeah, we're looking forward to hearing from all of you. Any last words from the panelists?
Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Yeah.
Thanks, Julie, for organizing it. Really wonderful. Appreciate it.
Together with
You and for
Clemencia,
organizing.
and yeah, it's a joint effort. And big thanks to Ruya and Adrian. Ruya, you want to say something about where people can find the recording and what happens next?
Sure. Well, thank you all. Thank you to the entire panel, to Julie, Franz, Maitri. Clementia has had to leave for another meeting, but on behalf of her and the UN Women Training Center, we're very grateful that you all attended. And the recording of this webinar will be available on the UN Women Training Center's YouTube channel. So just search for us on YouTube and you'll find the recording within a couple of days. And yeah, these are the websites of the project and the email address. And so we hope you'll be in touch with us soon. And we hope that we'll have a great cohort this time for the PDPTT 2.0.
Yeah.
So thank you all, and we wish you
Thanks.
all a wonderful evening.
Yeah, and we will also have it available on our KIT websites too.
Bye bye. Thank
Level.
you.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Bye.